Maya's legs felt like concrete as she forced herself across the blistering asphalt toward the cluster of Harley-Davidsons parked in the diner's shade. Her mother's purse, a worn leather bag Elena had carried for as long as Maya could remember, felt impossibly heavy in her sweating palms. The contents rattled with each step: loose change, lip balm, the ultrasound photo from last week's appointment that showed her baby brother's tiny fist. Think, Maya. Think like you're solving a calculus problem. But this wasn't advanced placement math. This was her mother, 8 months pregnant and diabetic, disappearing into the desert with a stranger who'd materialized like something from her worst nightmares. The man's face had been all sharp angles and cold eyes above a graying beard, his leather jacket bearing patches she couldn't read from a distance. 3 bikers sat in the diner's narrow strip of shade, nursing beers despite the early afternoon hour. They looked exactly like the kind of men her mother had always warned her to avoid, all tattoos, facial hair, and muscles that spoke of hard labor and harder lives. The nearest one, a bear of a man with arms like tree trunks, noticed her approach and nudged his companions. "You lost, little girl?" His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place. Maya's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to speak. "My mother, she was taken. By someone who looked like," she gestured vaguely at their leather cuts, "like you." The 3 men exchanged glances. The second biker, younger with intricate sleeve tattoos, set down his beer bottle with deliberate care. "When?" "10 minutes ago. Maybe 15. The words tumbled out faster now. "We stopped for lunch and this man approached her. He said something to her, and she went white. Then they walked toward the parking lot, and I lost sight of them behind that semi-truck. When I looked again, they were gone." "What'd he look like?" This from the third man, older than the others, with silver threading through his black hair and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. Maya closed her eyes, trying to capture details that had seemed unimportant minutes ago when her biggest worry was whether they'd reach Phoenix before rush-hour traffic. Tall, maybe 6'2". Graying beard, kept neat, leather jacket with patches, but I couldn't see what they said. He had this way of moving, like a predator. The scarred man, clearly their leader based on how the others deferred to him, studied her with unsettling intensity. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and Maya felt like he was reading her thoughts. "What's your name, kid?" "Maya Castellanos." She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of the fierce independence her mother had drilled into her during their years alone in East LA. "And I'm not a kid. I'm 16. Something flickered across the man's face at her name, gone too quickly to interpret. "I'm Ghost. This is Tank and Rico." He gestured to his companions. "Your mother, what's her name?" "Elena. Elena Castellanos." Maya clutched the purse tighter. "Look, I don't have money to pay you or anything, but—" "Kid," Ghost's voice cut through her desperation with surprising gentleness. "What were you and your mother doing out here?" "Moving to Phoenix. Mom got a job at St. Joseph's Hospital. She's a nurse. We were driving from LA and she wanted to stop here because—" Maya's voice caught. "Because this was where my dad proposed to her, before he died in Afghanistan when I was little." Ghost went very still. Tank and Rico looked between their leader and Maya like they were watching a bomb with a lit fuse. "Elena Castellanos," Ghost repeated slowly. "Nurse, widowed young, and she's pregnant." It wasn't a question, but Maya nodded anyway. "Due next month. That's why this is so crazy. Why would anyone take a pregnant woman? She can barely walk to the bathroom without getting winded." Ghost stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete. He was taller than she'd expected, and broader, with the kind of presence that made the desert air feel charged with electricity. The patch on his jacket read, "Desert Wolves MC," above the image of a snarling wolf silhouetted against a full moon. "Rico, get on the horn to Prospect. Tell him to pull traffic cameras from the last 2 hours. Every highway camera within 50 miles of here." His voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Tank, I want you to talk to everyone inside the diner. Someone had to see which direction they went." Maya felt a surge of hope mixed with confusion. "You'll help me?" Ghost looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw something raw and complicated in his expression. Pain, maybe, or recognition. When he spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "Yeah, kid. We'll help you find your mother." As Tank and Rico moved to carry out their orders, Maya wondered why Ghost's promise sounded less like reassurance and more like a threat. The next few minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos that reminded Maya uncomfortably of the emergency drills at Roosevelt High, purposeful movement masking barely contained panic. She watched Rico pull out a phone that looked military-grade, his fingers flying over the keypad as he barked coordinates and license plate numbers to someone called Prospect. Tank disappeared into the diner, his massive frame surprisingly graceful as he moved between tables, speaking in low, urgent tones to the handful of customers inside. Maya remained frozen by the picnic table, still clutching her mother's purse like a lifeline. The familiar weight of it anchored her to reality even as everything else spun out of control. Inside were the remnants of their ordinary life, the life they'd been leaving behind when they'd stopped at this godforsaken diner. Elena's reading glasses with the tiny crack in the left lens from when Maya had accidentally knocked them off the kitchen counter last month. A grocery list written in her mother's careful, cursive, prenatal vitamins, milk, those crackers that don't make me nauseous. The appointment card for next week's ultrasound at their new doctor's office in Phoenix. Their new life. The phrase tasted bitter now. Maya had fought the move for months, marshalling arguments with the same methodical precision that had earned her the top spot in AP Calculus. She'd cataloged everything they'd be losing: her position as editor of the school newspaper, her acceptance into the academic decathlon team, her carefully cultivated relationships with teachers who wrote the kind of recommendation letters that opened Ivy League doors. Mrs. Chen, her chemistry teacher, had pulled her aside just last week to discuss early admission to UCLA's pre-med program. "You have the kind of mind that could change the world," Mrs. Chen had said, her words echoing in Maya's memory now with painful irony. "Don't let fear hold you back from reaching your potential." But it hadn't been fear driving Maya's resistance to the move. It had been love. Love for the cramped apartment in Boyle Heights where she'd spent hours at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around her like battle plans while Elena worked double shifts to keep them afloat. Love for the corner bodega where Mr. Rodriguez let her practice her terrible Spanish and always asked about her grades. Love for the predictable rhythm of their life, where the biggest crisis was usually Maya staying up too late studying and Elena finding her asleep over her calculus homework the next morning. "You're going to burn yourself out, Mia," Elena would say, gently closing Maya's textbooks and guiding her toward bed. "The equations will still be there tomorrow." Maya had rolled her eyes at the gentle scolding, secure in the knowledge that her mother would always be there to worry about her sleep schedule and remind her to eat breakfast before school. When had she stopped appreciating those small moments of care? When had she started taking for granted that Elena would always be there, solid and dependable as the sunrise? Phoenix was supposed to be their fresh start. Better pay for Elena at the hospital, better schools for Maya, better opportunities for the baby brother who kicked restlessly against Elena's ribs during their planning sessions. Maya had finally, grudgingly, started to accept the idea. She'd even begun researching Arizona State University's honors program, though she'd die before admitting it to her mother. "We could be happy there," Elena had said just this morning, as they'd loaded the last boxes into their ancient Honda Civic. "You could have a real childhood for once, instead of worrying about taking care of everyone." The accusation had stung because it was true. Maya did worry about taking care of everyone. She worried about Elena's blood pressure and whether the pregnancy was too much stress on her 39-year-old body. She worried about their finances and whether Elena was working too many hours to pay for Maya's AP exam fees. She worried about her unborn brother and whether she'd be a good enough big sister to make up for the father he'd never know. Her dad, Elena's first husband, the soldier who died overseas when Maya was barely old enough to remember him, had been Maya's blueprint for responsibility and sacrifice. Elena's stories about him painted the picture of a man who'd put family first, always. Maya had spent years trying to live up to that legacy, to be worthy of the sacrifices both her parents had made. Ghost reappeared at her elbow, his presence jarring her back to the present. Rico's got eyes on the highways. Nothing yet, but prospects good at his job. His voice was steady, professional, but Maya caught something underneath it, a tension that matched her own. "Why are you helping me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You don't even know us." Ghost's scarred face was unreadable. "Sometimes you help people because it's the right thing to do." But Maya had spent too many years reading between the lines, parsing the hidden meanings in her mother's careful silences about their past. Ghost's answer felt incomplete, like a math problem missing crucial variables. In the distance, Tank emerged from the diner, his expression grim. Tank's heavy footsteps crunched across the gravel as he approached, and Maya's stomach clenched at his expression. She'd seen that same look on her AP history teacher's face when he'd had to explain why the Holocaust unit was harder to teach than the Revolutionary War, the weight of delivering terrible news to someone unprepared to receive it. "Nobody saw nothing," Tank said, directing his words to Ghost but glancing at Maya with something that might have been pity. "But the waitress remembers the guy. Said he came in asking specific questions." "What kind of questions?" Ghost's voice had gone flat and dangerous. "About Elena Castellanos. By name." Tank's massive hands flexed at his sides. "He knew she'd be here, Ghost. This wasn't random." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd been clinging to the hope that this was some terrible mistake, a case of wrong place, wrong time, a random predator who'd seen an easy target in a pregnant woman. But someone had been looking for her mother specifically. Someone had known they'd stop at this exact diner on this exact day. "That's impossible," Maya said, but even as the words left her mouth, she was remembering how Elena had insisted they take this route instead of the more direct freeway. How she'd specifically wanted to stop here, at this isolated place that held sentimental value. How she'd seemed nervous during the drive, checking her mirrors more often than usual. Ghost was studying her with those storm cloud eyes, and Maya felt exposed, like he could see every thought racing through her mind. "Maya, I need you to think carefully. Has your mother seemed different lately? Worried about anything? Maybe getting phone calls that upset her?" "She's pregnant," Maya said defensively. "Of course she's been worried. We're moving across state lines, starting over, and she's about to have a baby at 39. She has plenty of reasons to be stressed." But even as she spoke, Maya's analytical mind was cataloging details she'd dismissed at the time. Elena had started locking the apartment door during the day, something she'd never done in their old neighborhood despite Maya's complaints about safety. She'd switched banks suddenly last month, claiming the new one had better rates, but Maya had noticed she'd chosen one with branches in Phoenix. And there had been that night 2 weeks ago when Maya had gotten up for water and found Elena standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the street like she was expecting someone. There was something Maya admitted reluctantly. Last week, she got a letter. Official-looking envelope, no return address. She read it and went completely white, then threw it away immediately. Ghost and Tank exchanged a look that made Maya's skin crawl. "Did you see what it said?" Ghost asked. "No, Maya stopped, remembering. "She burned it. In the sink. Which was weird because we don't even have a garbage disposal. She usually just throws things in the trash. But this, she burned." Rico jogged over from his position by the motorcycles, his phone still pressed to his ear. "Prospect's got something," he called out, then spoke into the phone again. "Yeah, patch it through." He held the phone out to Ghost, who listened intently for several seconds before his face went stone cold. Maya watched his expression shift from professional concern to something darker and more personal. "How long ago?" Ghost asked into the phone. After a pause, "No, absolutely not. Keep monitoring, but do not engage. You understand me, Prospect? Do not engage." He ended the call and stood silent for a moment, his scarred face unreadable. Tank and Rico waited with the patience of men accustomed to following orders, but Maya felt like screaming. "What?" she demanded. "What did he find?" Ghost turned to face her fully, and Maya saw something in his expression that terrified her more than Tank's grim news or Rico's urgent phone calls. It was recognition, not the casual recognition of someone who'd seen her mother around town, but something deeper and more complicated. "Maya," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. What do you know about your mother's family? Her parents, siblings, anything before she married your father?" The question caught Maya off guard. Nothing. She was in foster care until she aged out. No family. It was one of the few concrete facts Maya had about Elena's past. Her mother had always been open about growing up in the system, using it as motivation for building the stable home she'd never had. "And your father's family?" "He was an only child. His parents died in a car accident while he was deployed." Maya frowned. "Why does any of this matter? We need to be looking for her, not—" "Because," Ghost interrupted, his voice heavy with a truth that Maya sensed would change everything, "I don't think your mother was taken by a stranger." The silence that followed Ghost's words stretched like a taut wire between them, vibrating with implications Maya couldn't yet process. She stared at his scarred face, searching for some indication that she'd misheard him, that his words didn't mean what her racing mind was already beginning to piece together. "What are you talking about?" The question came out sharper than she intended, edged with the kind of defensive anger she usually reserved for classmates who questioned her mother's decisions. "Of course it was a stranger. I saw him. I'd never seen him before in my life." But even as she spoke, Maya felt the first crack in her certainty. She'd been so focused on the man's threatening appearance, his predatory stillness, that she hadn't paid attention to her mother's reaction. Elena hadn't looked surprised when he'd approached their table. She'd looked resigned, like she'd been expecting him. "Ghost," Tank said quietly, a warning in his voice. "Maybe we should—" "No." Ghost's tone brooked no argument. She needs to know what she's walking into. He turned back to Maya, and she saw something that might have been regret in his expression. "The man who took your mother." Prospect spotted his bike heading north on Route 62, custom Harley California plates, and Maya, "He's riding with a woman who matches your mother's description. She's not fighting him. She's not trying to get away." The words hit Maya like physical blows, each one landing with devastating precision. Her mother wasn't fighting, wasn't trying to escape. The woman who'd taught Maya to scream if a stranger so much as looked at her wrong, who'd drilled into her the importance of never going anywhere with someone she didn't know, had walked away willingly with a man in leather. "You're wrong." Maya's voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow and distant. "She wouldn't— not without telling me. Not without—" She gestured helplessly at her mother's purse, still clutched in her hands. "She left everything. Maybe she left it on purpose," Rico said gently. "Maybe she wanted you to stay here where it's safe." Safe. The word felt foreign, incomprehensible. Nothing about this situation was safe. Nothing about her mother's behavior made sense. Elena was the most protective person Maya knew. She'd once driven 40 minutes across LA in traffic because Maya had forgotten her inhaler at school during allergy season, despite the fact that Maya hadn't had an asthma attack in 3 years. Maya's analytical mind began working despite her emotional chaos, sifting through data points like she was preparing for a debate tournament. Elena's sudden decision to move to Phoenix, her insistence on taking this specific route, the way she'd been checking her mirrors during the drive, the nervous energy Maya had attributed to pregnancy hormones, the burned letter, the locked doors. "She's been planning this," Maya said slowly, the realization creeping over her like ice water. The move to Phoenix wasn't about her job, was it? She was running from something. Or someone. Ghost nodded grimly. "That's what I'm starting to think." The betrayal hit Maya harder than fear. Her mother, her best friend, a person she trusted more than anyone in the world, had been lying to her. For how long? Weeks? Months? Maya thought about all the college applications she'd abandoned for this move, all the careful plans she'd restructured around their supposed fresh start in Phoenix. Had any of it been real? But why? The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why wouldn't she tell me? Why would she let me think?" Maya's voice broke. "I watched her get taken. I thought someone was going to hurt her and the baby. I was terrified." "Maybe that was the point," Tank said quietly. Maybe she needed your reaction to look real. The suggestion made Maya's stomach lurch. The idea that her mother had deliberately traumatized her, had used Maya's genuine terror as some kind of cover story, was almost too cruel to accept. But it fit the facts better than random kidnapping. "I can't do this," Maya said suddenly, backing away from the three bikers. "I can't. I need to call the police. This is insane. You're talking about my mother like she's some kind of criminal." "Maya." Ghost's voice followed her retreat, steady and implacable. "If you call the police right now, you might never see her again. Or your brother." She stopped moving. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if your mother felt she had to fake her own kidnapping to get away from something, then whatever she's running from is dangerous enough to kill for. And if the wrong people find out she's not really missing." Ghost let the implication hang in the desert air between them. Maya felt trapped between impossible choices: trust these strangers who seemed to know more about her mother's situation than they should, or follow protocol and call for official help that might make everything worse. The safe, predictable world she'd known this morning felt like a dream now, replaced by something dark and complex that her 16 years hadn't prepared her for. "I need time to think," she said finally. Ghost nodded. "Time's the one thing we might not have much of." Maya stood in the desert heat, her mother's purse cutting into her palms where she gripped it too tightly. The three bikers waited in silence, their patience somehow more unnerving than pressure would have been. In the distance, a semi-truck rumbled past on the highway, its diesel engine fading into the vast emptiness that surrounded them on all sides. "Time's the one thing we might not have much of." Ghost's words echoed in her mind as Maya stared at the cracked asphalt beneath her feet. Every instinct she'd been raised with screamed at her to walk away, to find an adult who could handle this properly. But the adults in her life had already proven themselves unreliable. Elena had lied to her for months, maybe longer. And the authorities? Maya had grown up in East LA knowing that sometimes the people who were supposed to help you did more harm than good. "Your friend," she said finally, not looking up from the ground. "The one watching the highways. What exactly did he see?" "Your mother riding north with the man who took her," Ghost replied. "No signs of distress, no attempts to signal for help." Maya's chest tightened. She'd been holding on to a thread of hope that maybe her mother was being coerced, that her apparent cooperation was just an act to protect herself and the baby. But if Elena had really orchestrated this whole thing— "Route 62 leads where?" Maya asked. "Toward 29 Palms, could branch off to Vegas, could head into the mountains." Ghost paused. "Could be going anywhere. Could be going anywhere." The phrase crystallized everything Maya feared most about this situation: the vastness of the unknown, the complete lack of control. Her entire life had been built on planning, on knowing the next step. She had 5-year academic plans, backup plans for her backup plans, contingency strategies for every conceivable obstacle between her and her goals. But none of those plans had accounted for this. Standing in a parking lot in the middle of nowhere, having to decide whether to trust 3 strangers on motorcycles or watch her mother disappear forever into the desert. Maya looked up at Ghost's scarred face, studying the map of old violence written there. In debate class, she'd learned to read people quickly, to identify their motivations and pressure points. But Ghost was different from anyone she'd ever encountered, harder to parse, carrying secrets in those storm cloud eyes that seemed older than his years. "You know more than you're telling me," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Ghost admitted, "I do. But you're not going to tell me what it is unless I commit to going with you." "That's right." Maya felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like a physical thing. Behind her lay everything she'd known, the predictable world of AP classes and college applications and 5-year plans. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and quite possibly the truth about why her mother had been lying to her. She thought about Elena's face that morning as they'd loaded the car, the way her hands had trembled slightly as she'd secured the last box in the trunk. Maya had attributed it to pregnancy nerves, but now she wondered if her mother had known this moment was coming. Had Elena planned for Maya to be standing here, facing this choice? Sometimes you help people because it's the right thing to do. Ghost's earlier words came back to her, But Maya suspected there was more to his motivation than simple altruism. He was invested in this somehow, personally invested in a way that suggested her mother's disappearance wasn't just about random danger. "If I come with you," Maya said slowly, "and we find her, and she really did leave willingly, what then? What if she doesn't want to be found?" "Then we make sure she's safe, and we respect her choice," Ghost replied. "But Maya, if someone was threatening your family, threatening your unborn brother, what wouldn't you do to protect them?" The question hit home. Maya had spent years being Elena's protector in small ways, researching the safest routes home from late shifts, insisting on security deposits for apartments in better neighborhoods, working part-time jobs to help with expenses despite Elena's protests. The idea that her mother might have been carrying some larger burden alone, might have been protecting Maya from threats she couldn't even imagine, made her chest ache with a combination of love and fury. Maya looked at the Honda Civic, their car loaded with the remnants of their old life and the hopes for their new one. The keys were in her pocket. She could drive away right now, go to Phoenix, try to build something resembling normal from the wreckage of this day. But normal had always been an illusion, hadn't it? Maya had spent so much energy trying to create stability and predictability that she'd missed the signs that their life was built on lies. "Okay," she said, the word coming out steady despite the chaos in her chest. "I'm in." Ghost nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Rico, get her car keys. We'll have someone drive it to safe storage." As Maya handed over the keys to their Honda, the last tangible link to their old life, she felt something shift inside her. There was no going back now. Whatever lay ahead in the desert, whatever truth Ghost was keeping from her, she was committed to seeing it through, even if it destroyed everything she thought she knew about her mother, her family, and herself. The moment Maya's keys disappeared into Rico's pocket, the reality of what she'd just committed to hit her like the desert heat, overwhelming and inescapable. She stood watching a stranger unlock their Honda, her hands empty for the first time since this nightmare began except for her mother's purse, which suddenly felt heavier than it should. "Second thoughts?" Ghost asked, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp. "About 1,000 of them," Maya admitted. "But that doesn't change anything." Ghost almost smiled at that, a slight quirk at the corner of his mouth that transformed his scarred face into something unexpectedly human. "Good. Doubt keeps you alive. Overconfidence gets you killed." Tank was already moving toward the motorcycles, his massive frame surprisingly graceful as he began checking their bikes with military precision. Rico jogged back from the Honda, tossing Maya's keys to Ghost, who pocketed them without ceremony. "Time to learn the rules," Ghost said, leading Maya toward a black Harley that looked like it had been built for war. "First rule, when we're moving, you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you to do it. No questions, no hesitation. Understood?" Maya bristled at the authoritarian tone. She'd never been good at blind obedience, but something in Ghost's expression stopped her protest. This wasn't about control, it was about survival. "Understood," she said. "Second rule, we stick together. No matter what we find, no matter what your mother might have told whoever she's with, you don't go off on your own. The desert's full of places to disappear people." The casual way he said it made Maya's skin crawl. Has that happened before? More often than you'd want to know. Ghost pulled a spare helmet from his bike's saddlebags, checking the interior for fit. "Third rule, trust your instincts, but verify with us first. You've got good eyes. I saw that when you were analyzing the parking lot earlier. But you don't know this world yet." Maya accepted the helmet, surprised by its weight. "What world?" "The one your mother's been hiding from." Ghost swung his leg over the Harley, the bike barely shifting under his weight. "The one where family secrets kill people, and the truth is the most dangerous weapon you can carry." Before Maya could process that cryptic statement, Tank's voice cut across the parking lot. "Ghost, we got company." Maya turned to see a dust cloud rising from the highway, two vehicles approaching fast from the south. Too fast for casual travelers. "Cops?" Rico asked, his hand moving instinctively toward something concealed under his jacket. Ghost shaded his eyes against the sun, studying the approaching vehicles. "No. Wrong configuration." His voice went cold. Maya, get on the bike. Now. But, now. The word cracked like a whip. Maya climbed onto the Harley behind Ghost, her hands shaking as she tried to figure out where to hold on. The seat was higher than she'd expected, giving her a clear view of the two black SUVs that were now turning into the parking lot with predatory precision. "Who are they?" she asked. But Ghost was already kick-starting the engine. The Harley roared to life beneath them, the vibration traveling through Maya's bones. Tank and Rico were mounting their bikes with practiced efficiency, but Maya could see the tension in their movements. Whatever was in those SUVs had them spooked. "Remember what I said about doing what I tell you," Ghost called over the engine noise. "Hold on tight. Lean when I lean, and whatever happens, don't let go." Maya wrapped her arms around his waist, surprised by the solid warmth of him. Through his leather jacket, she could feel old scars, thick ridges of tissue that spoke of violence survived. The first SUV pulled into the lot just as Tank's bike thundered to life. Maya caught a glimpse of tinted windows, government plates, and something that looked suspiciously like communication equipment on the roof. "Federal?" Rico shouted over the engine noise. "Maybe," Ghost replied, but he didn't sound convinced. "Doesn't matter. We're gone." He gunned the engine, and Maya's world exploded into noise and motion. The Harley shot forward with terrifying power, gravel spraying behind them as they tore across the parking lot toward a service road Maya hadn't even noticed before. Behind them, she heard car doors slamming, voices shouting something she couldn't make out over the motorcycle engines. Tank and Rico flanked them as they hit the service road, 3 bikes moving in formation like a military unit. "Where does this lead?" Maya yelled into Ghost's ear. "Away from them," he shouted back. "That's all that matters right now." Maya looked over her shoulder to see both SUVs turning onto the service road behind them, their engines roaring as they gave chase. Whatever world her mother had been hiding from, Maya realized with crystalline clarity she was now fully inside it. And there was no going back. The service road was barely more than hard-packed dirt and gravel, designed for maintenance vehicles, not high-speed chases. Maya's teeth rattled as the Harley hit a particularly vicious pothole, and she tightened her grip around Ghost's waist, trying not to think about what would happen if she fell off at this speed. The SUVs were gaining. Despite their bulk, they were built for this kind of pursuit. Reinforced chassis, enhanced suspension, engines that could eat highway miles without breaking a sweat. The motorcycles had maneuverability, but on this straight stretch of desert road, raw power was winning. "There," Tank's voice carried over the engine noise as he pointed toward a cluster of rock formations rising from the desert floor like ancient monuments. "The maze." Ghost nodded grimly and banked hard to the right, leaving the service road entirely. Maya's stomach lurched as they hit the uneven desert terrain, sagebrush and Joshua trees blurring past in streaks of green and brown. Behind them, she could hear the SUV's engines changing pitch as they followed, but their pursuit was already becoming more difficult. "What's the maze?" Maya shouted. "Old mining area," Ghost called back. "Natural rock formations, abandoned equipment. Easy to lose someone if you know the way through. If you know the way." Maya caught the implication and felt her chest tighten. This wasn't random. Ghost had planned for this possibility, mapped out escape routes like the former Marine he was. How many times had he run from people in black SUVs? How many times had her mother? They hit a dry wash, and Ghost throttled down, following the sandy bottom between walls of eroded stone. The sound of their engines echoed off the rocks, making it impossible to tell how close their pursuers were. Maya risked a glance back and saw nothing but curves and shadows. "Are they still following?" she asked. "Count on it," Ghost replied. "But SUVs can't navigate this terrain like we can." As if summoned by his words, the whine of stressed engines and scraping metal echoed from somewhere behind them. Someone was pushing their vehicle beyond its limits, trying to follow motorcycles through terrain designed by geology, not engineers. The wash opened into a wider area studded with massive boulders and the skeletal remains of mining equipment, rusted conveyor belts, collapsed wooden structures, holes in the ground that disappeared into perfect blackness. Tank led them in a serpentine pattern through the obstacles, his bulk somehow graceful as he navigated spaces that looked barely wide enough for a bicycle. Maya felt exposed despite the cover. They were moving slower now, threading carefully between hazards, and every shadow could hide an ambush. Her analytical mind was working overtime, cataloging escape routes and defensive positions, skills she'd never known she possessed until adrenaline sharpened them to diamond clarity. Ghost. Rico's voice was tight. Movement at 2 o'clock. Maya looked where he was pointing and saw it. A flash of black metal between the rocks, maybe 200 yards away. One of the SUVs had found another route through the maze, cutting parallel to their course. "They're trying to get ahead of us," Ghost said, his voice carrying a note Maya hadn't heard before. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it. Respect for a competent enemy. "Who are they?" Maya asked again, but Ghost was already accelerating, weaving between boulders with precision that spoke of intimate familiarity with this terrain. The question that really terrified her wasn't who they were, but how they'd found the diner so quickly. Maya had been with Ghost and his crew for less than an hour, which meant these people had either been tracking her mother's movements or they'd been watching the motorcycle club. Either possibility suggested resources and coordination that went far beyond local law enforcement. Tank's bike suddenly lurched to the right, disappearing behind a wall of red sandstone. Rico followed, and Ghost brought up the rear, the Harley's engine note changing as they climbed a narrow trail that switchbacked up the side of what Maya now realized was a small mountain. "Where are we going?" Maya called over the wind. "High ground," Ghost replied. "Need to see what we're dealing with." The trail leveled out on a plateau maybe 50 feet above the desert floor, offering a panoramic view of the maze they'd just navigated. Maya could see both SUVs now, one stuck between two boulders, its occupants presumably continuing on foot, the other still mobile but moving slowly through the treacherous terrain. Ghost cut the engine and pulled out a pair of compact binoculars, studying their pursuers with professional intensity. Tank and Rico flanked him, creating a defensive perimeter with unconscious military precision. 4 in each vehicle, Ghost said quietly. Body armor, communication headsets, coordinated movement patterns. He lowered the binoculars, his scarred face grim. "These aren't federal agents, Maya. They're contractors." "What kind of contractors?" Ghost met her eyes, and Maya saw something there that made her blood run cold, the kind that make people disappear. The words hung in the desert air like a death sentence. Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. The last vestige of hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding crumbling into dust. "My mother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They have my mother." "Maybe," Ghost said, but his tone suggested he believed it too. "Or maybe she's exactly where she wants to be, trying to lead them away from you." Maya's hands started shaking, not from fear, she was beyond fear now, but from a rage so pure and focused it surprised her. These faceless people in their black SUVs had turned her world into a war zone, had made her mother disappear, had forced a 16-year-old girl to make impossible choices in a parking lot in the middle of nowhere. "What do they want?" she asked. Ghost was studying the terrain below, his scarred face calculating distances and angles like he was planning a battle. "That's the million-dollar question, literally." Tank had moved to the eastern edge of the plateau, his massive frame surprisingly light on his feet. "Ghost," he called quietly. "Ground team moving up the south face, maybe 10 minutes out." Rico was checking his sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Vehicle 2's backing out, probably going for reinforcements." Maya felt the walls closing in. They were trapped on a plateau with armed contractors climbing toward them, more enemies potentially on the way, and her mother somewhere out there in the vast desert carrying secrets that people killed for. "We have to run," she said. "Where?" Ghost asked, not unkindly. "They've got vehicles, communication equipment, probably air support if this goes long enough. Running just delays the inevitable. So we fight?" The words came out stronger than Maya felt, but saying them unleashed something fierce and desperate inside her. Ghost looked at her with something that might have been approval. "You're your mother's daughter, all right. What's that supposed to mean?" Elena didn't run either, Rico said from his position. Even when staying meant putting herself in danger. Maya's analytical mind seized on that detail like a lifeline. You knew her. Before. You all knew her. Ghost's jaw tightened. Focus on staying alive first. Family history later. But Maya was done being managed and protected and fed half-truths. Her mother was gone. There were armed people hunting her, and she was trapped on a mountain in the Mojave Desert with 3 bikers who obviously knew more about her family than she did. No, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Tell me now. Tell me why these people want us dead. Tell me what my mother was running from. Tell me why you really came to help me. Ghost met her eyes, and Maya saw him make a decision that would change everything. Because Elena Castellanos is my daughter, he said quietly. The daughter I gave up for adoption 25 years ago. The world stopped. Maya stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he'd just said. The scarred face, the storm-gray eyes that had seemed familiar in a way she couldn't place, the protective instinct that had driven him to help a stranger in a diner parking lot. That's impossible, she whispered. Tank, how long? Ghost called, never breaking eye contact with Maya. 8 minutes, maybe less. The baby, Maya said, pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. The baby she's carrying. That's your grandchild, Ghost finished. And if these contractors are who I think they are, that baby represents something worth killing for. Maya felt like she was drowning in revelations, each one more impossible than the last. What could a baby represent that's worth this? Ghost's expression went darker than she'd thought possible. Money. Specifically, a trust fund worth $43 million that legally belongs to Elena's child. My grandchild. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. $43 million. More money than she'd imagined in her wildest dreams. More than enough to justify the kind of professional manhunt currently closing in on them. How do you know all this? She asked. Because 3 weeks ago, Elena found me, Ghost said. Tracked me down and told me everything. About the adoption, about discovering her real parentage, about the lawyers who'd been trying to contact her regarding an inheritance. She was terrified, Maya. Said people were watching her, following her. She asked for my help. Maya's world tilted sideways. 3 weeks ago? But we were still in LA 3 weeks ago. She never said anything about movement. Tank's voice cut through her confusion. They're here. The first gunshot echoed off the canyon walls like thunder, and Maya's greatest fear became reality. Everything she'd thought she knew about her life had been a lie, and now people were trying to kill her for it. The gunshot shattered more than just the desert silence. It destroyed every plan Maya had dared to hope might work. The sharp crack echoed off the canyon walls, followed immediately by Tank's grunt of pain as he stumbled backward from the plateau's edge, crimson spreading across his left shoulder. Sniper, Rico shouted, diving behind the nearest boulder. Long range, southwest position. Ghost grabbed Maya's arm, hauling her toward cover, but she could see the calculation in his eyes, the cold assessment of a tactical situation gone catastrophically wrong. They were pinned down on high ground with nowhere to retreat, facing professional killers who had just demonstrated. They were willing to shoot first and sort out the bodies later. Another shot rang out, this one sparking off the rock inches from Ghost's head. Maya felt concrete certainty settle in her chest like ice water. They were going to die here. All of them. Tank, how bad? Ghost called out, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Through and through, Tank grunted, pressing his massive hand against the wound. I'm mobile, but not for long. Maya's analytical mind cataloged their resources with desperate precision. 3 men, 1 wounded, limited ammunition, no escape route. At least 4 contractors climbing the southern face, probably more in reserve, plus a sniper in an elevated position with clear lines of sight across the plateau. The math was simple and brutal. They were outgunned, outmanned, and trapped. The trail we came up, Maya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Can we get back to the bikes? Not without crossing open ground, Rico replied. That sniper's got the whole eastern approach covered. Ghost was studying their position with the cold focus of someone who'd been in hopeless situations before. Maya, I need you to listen very carefully. In about 30 seconds, we're going to lay down covering fire and you're going to run for the trail. What about you? We'll follow when we can. The lie was so obvious it hurt. Maya could see it in his eyes, in the way Tank was checking his ammunition, in Rico's grim expression as he chambered a round. They were planning to hold this position so she could escape. They were planning to die for her. No, she said. I'm not leaving you. Maya? I said no. The words came out louder than she'd intended, fueled by a rage that had been building since the moment her mother vanished. I am not losing anyone else today. Ghost's scarred face softened for just a moment. Kid, sometimes... The crack of another rifle shot cut him off, followed immediately by the sound of scrambling feet on stone. The ground team had reached the plateau. Contact front, Tank bellowed, his sidearm barking as muzzle flashes lit up the growing shadows between the rocks. Salsa Maya pressed herself against the boulder, her heart hammering as bullets whined overhead. This was it, the moment when all their desperate plans and half-formed strategies collapsed into chaos and violence. The moment when she lost everything that mattered. Ghost! Rico's voice carried a note of panic Maya hadn't heard before. Movement on the north face too. We're surrounded. The truth hit Maya like a physical blow. These contractors hadn't just found them. They'd been herded here. The chase through the maze, the apparent escape to high ground, even the sniper's position forcing them into cover. It had all been orchestrated, designed to drive them exactly where their enemies wanted them. Her mother's training kicked in, all those hours of chess, of analyzing patterns, of thinking 3 moves ahead. This wasn't a random encounter, or even an opportunistic ambush. This was a trap that had been set long before Maya ever walked into that diner. They knew, she said, the words falling from her lips like stones. They knew we'd come here. Ghost's eyes met hers across the narrow space between boulders, and she saw her own realization reflected there. Someone told them about the maze, about our escape routes. The implications were staggering. If the contractors had inside information about Ghost's operations, about the terrain he'd considered safe, then everything they thought they knew was compromised. Every plan, every sanctuary, every ally could be working for the enemy. Tank's return fire had slowed, his movements becoming sluggish as blood loss took its toll. Rico was down to his last magazine. Ghost's jaw was set in the expression of a man calculating how much time they had left measured in heartbeats. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her mother's purse against her side. Inside it, somewhere among Elena's scattered belongings, might be the answers they needed, but they were about to die without ever finding them. When she opened her eyes, Maya saw Ghost watching her with something that looked like pride. For what it's worth, he said quietly, Elena would be proud of who you've become. The words felt like a goodbye, and Maya realized with crystalline certainty that everything, her search for her mother, her desperate alliance with these scarred warriors, her hope of understanding the truth about her family, was about to end in blood and silence on a plateau in the middle of nowhere. The sound of boots on stone grew closer, and Maya felt death approaching with methodical precision. But instead of paralyzing her, something else took over, the same fierce protectiveness that had driven her mother to hide secrets, to run across a desert, to speak with dangerous strangers in parking lots. Mom's purse, Maya said suddenly, pulling the worn leather bag against her chest. The answers are in here. Ghost glanced at her between bursts of covering fire. Maya, there's no time. There has to be. She dumped the contents onto the rocky ground with desperate urgency. Lipstick, receipts, her mother's worn wallet, and something else. A small leather journal Maya had never seen before, bound with an elastic band. Rico's ammunition clicked empty. That's it for me. Maya's fingers fumbled with the journal's binding as bullets sparked off stone inches away. The pages fell open to reveal her mother's familiar handwriting, but the words made no sense. Names, dates, phone numbers, all written in Elena's careful script. Vincent Moreau, birth name Michael Castellanos. Maya's heart stopped. She read the line again, then looked up at Ghost with dawning horror. "Vincent," she whispered. "Your name is Vincent." Ghost's scarred face went white. "How do you—" "Michael Castellanos," Maya read aloud from the journal. "Born March 15, 1975. Given up for adoption by Maria Castellanos, age 16. The desert seemed to tilt around them. Tank's breathing was getting labored. Rico was down to his sidearm, and contractors were climbing toward them from multiple directions, but Maya couldn't look away from the page in her hands. "You're not her father," she said, the truth crashing over her like a physical wave. "You're her brother." Ghost's weapon lowered slightly. "That's impossible." But Maya was already flipping pages, finding more entries in her mother's meticulous handwriting. A family tree sketched out in blue ink, birth records, adoption papers, and at the center of it all, a truth so staggering it made the gunfight around them feel surreal. Maria Castellanos had twins, Maya read, her voice growing stronger with each word. Michael and Elena both given up for adoption but separated. Elena was adopted by the Rodriguezes in LA. Michael was adopted by the Moreaus in Nevada. Jesus Christ. Rico breathed from behind his boulder. Maya found the page she needed, the one that made everything else make sense. "The trust fund isn't for Elena's child. It's from your grandmother, Maria Castellanos, who married into the Benedetti family after giving up her children. She died 2 years ago and left everything to her biological grandchildren. All of them." Ghost stared at her, his scarred face cycling through disbelief, recognition, and something approaching devastation. "We're twins. Fraternal twins separated at birth." Maya's hands were shaking as she held up the journal. "Mom spent months tracking this down. She found you first, but she was afraid to approach you because I'm exactly what she was running from," Ghost finished, his voice hollow. "A criminal. A killer. Everything she wanted to protect her family from." The gunfire had stopped. Maya realized with growing alarm that the contractors were close enough now that they didn't need to shoot. They could simply surround the plateau and wait. "There's more," Maya said, flipping to the final pages. "The people hunting you, hunting us, they're not after the money, they're after something else." She found the page that made her blood freeze. Corporate letterhead, official documents, and at the top, a logo she recognized from news reports about government contractors and overseas military operations. "Blackwater Security Solutions," she read. "They've been hired to acquire all living members of the Castellanos bloodline for questioning regarding national security matters related to Maria Castellanos' first husband, Roberto Benedetti." Ghost took the journal with hands that weren't quite steady. Roberto Benedetti. Why does that name sound familiar? Maya had already found that answer too. Because he was a CIA operative who disappeared in Colombia in 1987 with $43 million in drug cartel money. Money that was never recovered. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about an inheritance. It was about a decades-old intelligence operation gone wrong, about money that belonged to the United States government, about secrets that people had killed to protect. "They think we know where the money is," Maya said. "They think our grandmother told our parents, who told us. Do we?" Ghost asked. Maya flipped to the very last page of the journal, where her mother had written a single line in handwriting that looked hasty, desperate, like she'd been interrupted. The money was never missing. Roberto Benedetti was never a traitor. He was assassinated by his own people for discovering. The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off the page. "Ghost," Tank called weakly. "Company's here." Maya looked up to see armed figures emerging from cover all around the plateau, their weapons trained with professional precision. At least 8 contractors, maybe more, all wearing the same tactical gear and cold expressions. But Maya wasn't afraid anymore, because now she understood what her mother had died to protect, what Ghost had spent his life running from without knowing it, and what the contractors would kill them all to keep secret. The truth about Roberto Benedetti, the truth about $43 million, and the truth about why their entire family had been marked for death from the moment they were born. The contractors held their positions, weapons trained but not firing. Maya realized they wanted her and Ghost alive, at least long enough to extract whatever information they thought the Castellanos, twins, possessed about Roberto Benedetti's missing millions. "Lower your weapons," a voice called from the eastern edge of the plateau. A woman emerged from behind the rocks, older than the other contractors, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes like winter ice. "Miss Castellanos, Mr. Moreau, my name is Director Sarah Chen. We need to talk." Ghost's grip tightened on his sidearm, but Maya could see the tactical calculation in his scarred face. 8 contractors, high ground compromised, tank bleeding and Rico nearly out of ammunition. Fighting now would be suicide. "Talk about what?" Maya called back, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "About why your mother really disappeared. About what Roberto Benedetti discovered in 1987 that got him killed. And about why the people who murdered him are now coming for you." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Her mother hadn't been kidnapped by these contractors. She'd been running from something else entirely, something worse. "Tank," Ghost murmured without taking his eyes off Director Chen. "How you holding up?" Still breathing, Tank grunted, though his face was pale beneath his beard. "Still fighting if it comes to that." But Maya was studying the director's expression, looking for tells the way her mother had taught her during countless chess games. Chen wasn't posturing like someone in complete control. There was urgency there, maybe even desperation disguised as professional calm. "You don't know where she is," Maya said suddenly. "You're hunting us because you lost track of my mother." Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, confirmation enough for Maya's analytical mind. "Elena Castellanos disappeared 3 days ago from a safe house in Phoenix," the director admitted. "She was under federal protection after coming to us with information about Roberto Benedetti's death, information that certain parties would kill to suppress." Ghost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Federal protection. "Right. That's why she was running scared, why she reached out to me for help." "Your sister didn't trust us," Chen said, and Maya caught the slight emphasis on sister, confirmation that the government knew about the twin connection. She believed someone inside our operation was compromised. 3 days later, our safe house was breached by unknown hostiles and Elena vanished. Maya felt pieces clicking together in her mind. "The contractors who've been chasing us, they're not working for you." "No. They're working for the same people who killed Roberto Benedetti 36 years ago. People with resources, government connections, and a very strong interest in making sure certain truths never surface." Rico shifted position behind his boulder, and Maya caught his eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the southern trail. He'd spotted something the contractors hadn't. An escape route maybe, or reinforcements approaching. But Maya wasn't ready to run. Not when they were finally getting answers. "What truth?" she demanded. "What did my grandfather discover that was worth killing for?" Chen glanced at her watch, and Maya realized with growing alarm that the director was operating under some kind of deadline. "Roberto Benedetti wasn't killed for stealing $43 million, Chen said. "He was killed because he discovered that the money was being used to fund illegal operations inside the United States, operations that continue to this day." The implications hit Maya like vertigo. A decades-long conspiracy involving government agencies, missing money, and operations that powerful people would still kill to protect. "Elena had proof," Chen continued. "Documents, recordings, evidence that could bring down entire networks of corruption. When she disappeared from our safe house, that evidence vanished with her." Ghost's expression had shifted from suspicious to calculating. "And you think she told us where to find it?" "Your mother was thorough," Chen said, looking directly at Maya. "She knew she was in danger. She would have made contingency plans." Maya's hand instinctively moved to her mother's journal, still clutched against her chest. Elena had been thorough enough to research her family history, to track down the brother she'd never known existed, to document everything she'd discovered about Roberto Benedetti. But there was something else. Maya flipped quickly through the journal's pages, looking for what she'd missed before. Her mother's handwriting covered every page, but near the back, the ink changed color. Blue to black, as if Elena had been writing in different sessions. The final entry was in black ink, the handwriting rushed but deliberate. If something happens to me, Maya will know what to do. I taught her to think 3 moves ahead. The queen protects the king by sacrificing herself, but she always has an escape plan. Maya's breath caught. Chess. Her mother was talking about chess, their shared language of strategy and sacrifice. Ghost, Maya said quietly. I think I know where she is. Ghost's eyes locked onto Maya's face, reading the certainty there. Around them, the standoff with Chen's contractors held its precarious balance, weapons trained but fingers not yet on triggers. Where? He asked, simply. Maya's mind raced through every chess lesson her mother had taught her, every late-night game where Elena had emphasized the importance of thinking beyond the obvious moves. The queen protects the king by sacrificing herself, but she always has an escape plan. The endgame, Maya said, flipping to a page she'd dismissed before, a rough sketch that looked like a map. Mom always said the endgame is where you reveal your real strategy. Everything before that is just positioning. The sketch showed a simple building layout with cryptic notations in her mother's handwriting. Numbers that could be coordinates, times, or something else entirely. But at the bottom of the page, in careful block letters, Elena had written, "Where it all began, the diner." Maya breathed. She went back to the diner where you first met. Ghost's scarred face went rigid with understanding. Manny's desert stop. But that makes no sense. It's the first place anyone would look. Unless that's exactly why it makes sense. Maya was thinking aloud now, following her mother's logic the way she'd learned to follow chess patterns. You hide in the last place your opponent would think to check. The place they've already dismissed. Director Chen took a step closer, her ice-blue eyes fixed on the journal in Maya's hands. Ms. Castellanos, if you know where your mother is hiding, we can protect her. But time is running out. Protect her like you protected her in Phoenix, Ghost snarled. The safe house was compromised by someone with high-level access, Chen shot back. Someone who knew our protocols, our procedures. Elena was right not to trust the system, but she was wrong to think she could handle this alone. Maya studied the director's face, looking for deception, but Chen's urgency seemed genuine, and that made Maya more afraid, not less. If the people hunting her mother had resources that could compromise federal operations, what chance did Elena have on her own? There's something else, Maya said, finding another page in the journal. Mom wrote about a deadline. Something happening in... She checked the date notation. Today. Something's happening today. Rico's voice cut through the tension. Ghost, we've got movement on the access road. Vehicles approaching fast. The sound reached them a moment later. Engines straining up the desert grades, multiple vehicles moving with purpose toward their position. Chen's expression went from controlled urgency to barely contained panic. That's not us, she said, already signaling her contractors to adjust positions. How long until they reach the plateau? 10 minutes, maybe less, Rico replied. Maya felt the familiar weight of impossible choices, the same crushing responsibility that had driven her to seek out Ghost in the first place. Stay and fight impossible odds, or run and leave her mother exposed to whatever was coming. But as she clutched Elena's journal, another option crystallized, the kind of desperate 3 moves ahead strategy her mother would appreciate. Director Chen, Maya said, her voice cutting through the tactical chatter. You want the evidence my mother gathered? You want to bring down this conspiracy that's been running for 36 years? Yes. Then you're going to help us get to that diner, and you're going to trust that Elena Castellanos is smarter than all of us combined. Ghost stared at Maya as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Kid, what are you thinking? Maya closed the journal and met her uncle's eyes with steel in her own. I'm thinking it's time to stop running and start fighting back. Mom didn't disappear because she was scared. She disappeared because she's setting a trap, and she needs us to spring it. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls with mechanical menace. Chen's contractors were already falling back toward defensive positions, but Maya could see in their movements that they knew this plateau would become a killing field within minutes. My mother spent months planning this, Maya continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. She found Ghost. She documented everything about Roberto Benedetti. She gathered evidence that could bring down the people who killed our grandfather. And then she made herself the bait to draw them into the open. That's suicide, Tank said through gritted teeth. No, Maya replied, understanding flooding through her like revelation. That's chess. You sacrifice pieces to protect the king, but the real strategy is forcing your opponent to expose their own pieces. Mom's not hiding at that diner. She's waiting there, waiting for us to bring her the final piece she needs to end this. Maya looked directly at Director Chen. The question is, are you here to help us win, or are you just another piece on the wrong side of the board? Chen's radio crackled with urgent voices reporting tactical positions and threat assessments. Time was running out for all of them. Against my better judgment, Chen said finally, I'm in. The plateau erupted into controlled chaos as Chen's contractors moved with military precision, transforming from captors to allies in the span of heartbeats. Maya watched the tactical ballet unfold. Weapons redistributed, defensive positions abandoned for evacuation protocols, the entire dynamic of their standoff reshaping itself around a shared enemy approaching from the desert floor. Movement south-southwest, Rico called, his voice carrying new authority now that he wasn't outnumbered 8-1. 3 vehicles, maybe 4. They're pushing hard up that access road. Ghost was already in motion, helping Tank to his feet with surprising gentleness for someone with his reputation. Maya caught the careful way her uncle supported the injured biker, the practiced efficiency of someone who'd carried wounded comrades before. Another piece of the puzzle that was Vincent Ghost Moreau, not just a criminal, but a Marine who'd never stopped looking after his brothers. Can you ride? Ghost asked Tank. Can I breathe? Tank shot back, though his face was gray beneath his beard. Then I can ride. Director Chen moved to Maya's side, her ice-blue eyes scanning the journal pages with professional intensity. Your mother's handwriting. Some of these notations match intelligence markers we use. She had training. The revelation should have shocked Maya, but instead, it felt like another chess piece sliding into place. Of course her mother had training. Elena Castellanos didn't do anything halfway, whether it was researching her family history or protecting her daughter from a decades-old conspiracy. What kind of training? Maya demanded. The kind that would make her very, very dangerous to the people who killed Roberto Benedetti. Chen's radio squawked with tactical updates, but she ignored it. Maya, if your mother is setting a trap, she's not planning to survive it. That's not how these operations work. The words hit Maya like a physical blow, but Ghost's scarred hand landed on her shoulder before the panic could take hold. Your mom didn't raise a quitter, he said simply. And she didn't spend months planning this just to throw her life away. If Elena's got an endgame, it's one where she comes home to you. Maya nodded, drawing strength from the certainty in Ghost's voice. But as she looked around the plateau, at wounded Tank, at Rico checking his ammunition, at Chen's contractors preparing for a running firefight across the Mojave, she realized the scope of what her mother was asking of them. This isn't just about exposing the truth, Maya said, the understanding crystallizing as she spoke. Mom needs us to bring the enemy to her, all of them, everyone who's been hunting our family for 36 years. Jesus, Rico breathed. She's using us as bait to bait the real bait. Chen's radio crackled with urgent voices. Director, hostile vehicles are 2 minutes out. We need to move now. But Maya was still thinking 3 moves ahead, following her mother's logic to its inevitable conclusion. The diner's not just where this started, it's where Mom wants this to end. She's been drawing them all there, the people who killed Roberto, the ones who compromised your safe house, everyone who thinks they can bury the truth by burying our family. Ghost's eyes went wide with realization. She's not setting a trap. She's setting a war. The sound of engines grew louder, closer, and Maya could see dust plumes rising from the access road like smoke signals announcing violence. In minutes, this plateau would become exactly what Chen had warned, a killing field with no escape routes and no mercy for the trapped. But Maya felt something she hadn't expected, a fierce pride in Elena Castellanos. The honor student turned mother turned chess master who'd spent 16 years teaching her daughter that every problem had a solution if you were willing to think beyond the obvious moves. Everyone keep talking about what Mom's planning, Maya said, her voice cutting through the tactical chatter and engine noise. But nobody's asking what I'm planning. The plateau went quiet except for the approaching vehicles. Ghost, Chen, Rico, Tank, all of them staring at the 16-year-old girl who'd started this journey as a desperate daughter and somehow become the key to ending a conspiracy older than she was. Maya opened her mother's journal to the final page, where Elena's handwriting trailed off mid-sentence. But now Maya saw what she'd missed before, faint pencil marks beneath the ink, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. Coordinates. Not to the diner, but to something else entirely. Mom didn't just leave me a message about where to find her, Maya said, understanding flooding through her with the force of revelation. She left me Roberto Benedetti's real evidence, the proof that got him killed, the smoking gun that everyone thinks is missing. She looked up at Ghost, at Chen, at the approaching storm of violence and vengeance that had been building for 4 decades. And I know exactly how we're going to use it. The first bullets shattered the desert silence as the enemy vehicles crested the plateau's edge, black SUVs disgorging tactical teams with the fluid precision of a military operation. Maya dove behind the nearest boulder as gunfire erupted around them, Chen's contractors returning fire while Ghost dragged Tank toward the motorcycles. Maya? Ghost's voice cut through the chaos. Those coordinates, where do they lead? Maya pressed herself against the rock, her mother's journal clutched to her chest as bullets sparked off stone inches from her head. The pencil markings she'd discovered were burned into her memory now, coordinates that didn't match the diner, didn't match any location they'd discussed. But they did match something else, something her mother had mentioned in passing weeks ago. The old mining station, Maya shouted back. 20 miles east of the diner. Mom said Roberto used to meet his contacts there. Director Chen materialized beside Maya in a crouch, ice-blue eyes calculating angles and distances with professional calm. That station's been abandoned for decades. If Elena's there with evidence... She's not there, Maya interrupted, understanding her mother's final gambit with crystalline clarity. She's at the diner like I said, but the evidence is at the mining station. She separated herself from the proof so if they found one, they wouldn't automatically get the other. Another volley of gunfire forced them all lower. Rico's voice carried from across the firefight. Ghost! We've got more vehicles coming up the south trail. We're about to be surrounded. Maya's mind raced through the tactical situation the way her mother had taught her to analyze chess positions. The enemy had superior numbers, superior positioning, superior firepower. In any conventional battle, Ghost's crew would be slaughtered within minutes. But this wasn't a conventional battle. This was the endgame Elena Castellanos had been orchestrating for months. Chen, Maya called, how many people know about this operation? Your operation, right now? The director's response was immediate, classified compartmentalization. Maybe 6 people total. And how many of your people are here on this plateau? Chen's face went pale as the implication hit her. 4. Which means at least 2 people in your inner circle are working for the enemy, Maya finished. They've been feeding information, compromising safe houses, staying one step ahead because they've been inside your operation the entire time. Ghost appeared at Maya's shoulder, his scarred face grim but determined. Kid, this is all real interesting, but we need to move before they close the circle. But Maya shook her head, that fierce certainty filling her again. No. We don't run. We give them exactly what they want. She stood up slowly, hands visible, her mother's journal held high. Around the plateau, gunfire gradually ceased as the tactical teams realized what they were seeing. A 16-year-old girl offering surrender. I have what you're looking for, Maya's voice carried across the sudden quiet. Elena Castellanos' evidence, the proof about Roberto Benedetti and the $43 million. A figure emerged from behind the lead SUV, a man in tactical gear with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. When he spoke, his voice carried authority and barely contained menace. Miss Castellanos, your mother has caused us considerable inconvenience. Funny, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. She said the same thing about you. Behind her, She could hear Ghost's sharp intake of breath. He understood now what Maya was doing, the same desperate all-or-nothing strategy that Elena had used when she disappeared from the safe house. "You want the evidence?" Maya continued. "You want to finally bury the truth about what happened in 1987? Then you're going to have to deal with all of us. Together." At the place where this all started, the tactical commander's laugh held no warmth. "You're hardly in a position to make demands." "Aren't I?" Maya opened the journal, letting pages flutter in the desert wind. "My mother documented everything: names, dates, financial transactions, government connections. She made copies, sent them to journalists, lawyers, federal investigators. The only way you stop this information from going public is if you get every single copy." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "And the only person who knows where they all are is Elena Castellanos herself." The silence stretched taut as a wire, broken only by the desert wind and the distant rumble of more engines approaching. Maya could feel the weight of every gaze on the plateau. Ghost's desperate pride, Chen's professional calculation, the enemy commander's cold fury. "So here's what's going to happen," Maya said, her voice carrying new authority born of absolute desperation. "We're all going to the diner, all of us. And we're going to finish what Roberto Benedetti started 36 years ago." The commander raised his weapon, aiming directly at Maya's heart. "Or, we could just kill you all here and take our chances with the evidence." Maya smiled then, an expression her mother would have recognized from 1,000 chess games where Elena had sacrificed her queen to force checkmate. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "But then you'll never find my mother before she broadcasts everything she knows on every news network in the country." The standoff stretched for heartbeats that felt like hours. Maya watched the tactical commander's finger hover over his trigger, knowing that everything, her life, her mother's plan, 36 years of buried truth, balanced on the knife's edge of his decision. Then Ghost stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the rifle and Maya. "She's right," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced death before. "Kill us now, and you lose everything. Elena's too smart to put all her eggs in one basket. But she loves that girl behind me more than life itself, and if Maya calls her, Elena will come running." Maya felt something crack inside her chest, not fear but understanding. The sacrifice wasn't just about her mother anymore. Ghost was offering himself as collateral, trusting in Elena's maternal instinct to complete whatever trap she'd been setting. The commander lowered his weapon fractionally. "You have 1 hour to produce Elena Castellanos and every piece of evidence she's gathered. The diner. No tricks, no backup, no clever plans. 1 hour." Director Chen moved to Maya's side. "And if she doesn't comply?" The man's smile was winter cold. "Then everyone dies, and we clean up the loose ends ourselves, starting with the girl." As the tactical teams began falling back to their vehicles, Maya grabbed Ghost's arm. "You can't do this. You can't just hand yourself over. Kid." Ghost's scarred face was gentle now, paternal in a way that reminded Maya achingly of how Elena looked when she was trying to protect her daughter from hard truths. "Your mother didn't spend months planning this so you could watch everyone get slaughtered on a plateau in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes winning means knowing when to fold." "This isn't folding," Maya said fiercely. "This is exactly what Mom wanted. Don't you see? She needed all of them in one place. The people who killed Roberto, the ones who've been hunting our family, even the corrupted federal agents. She's been drawing them together like pieces on a chessboard." Rico appeared at Ghost's shoulder, his young face grim with understanding. "Maya's right. Elena's been playing the long game this whole time. Question is, do we trust her enough to see it through?" Tank limped over, still pale but determined. "Ghost, that woman raised a daughter who walked into a biker bar and demanded help from strangers. She's got backbone and she's got a plan. But plans don't mean shit if good people don't have the courage to follow them." Maya looked around at these men who'd become her unlikely family over the past few days. Ghost with his hidden depths and fierce loyalty, Rico with his quick mind and quicker reflexes, Tank with his steady courage despite his wounds. They were offering to walk into what might be their deaths because they trusted Elena Castellanos and the daughter she'd raised. The weight of that trust settled on Maya's shoulders like armor. "There's something else," Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying new steel. "The coordinates Mom hid in the journal, they're not just for evidence, they're for a broadcasting station. The old mining operation had radio equipment, long-range transmitters for emergency communications." Director Chen's eyes widened with understanding. She's not planning to negotiate. She's planning to broadcast everything simultaneously, make it impossible to contain. "But only if we bring her the final piece," Maya continued, following her mother's logic to its devastating conclusion. "Elena needs proof that the people hunting us are willing to kill federal agents, biker club members, even a 16-year-old girl to bury the truth. She needs them to expose themselves completely." Ghost stared at Maya with something like awe. "Jesus, kid. Your mother's not setting a trap, she's setting up a public execution." The implications crystallized for all of them. Elena wasn't just gathering evidence, she was orchestrating a live demonstration of the conspiracy's reach and ruthlessness. Every threat, every act of violence, every compromise of federal authority would be documented and transmitted beyond the reach of cover-ups or damage control. But the cost would be measured in lives. "Maya," Chen said carefully, "if your mother broadcasts everything while we're at the diner, we become the evidence," Maya finished. "Living proof of how far these people will go, but also witnesses to make sure the truth actually gets out." The tactical vehicles were moving now, black shapes against the desert horizon heading toward a confrontation 36 years in the making. Maya felt the terrible clarity of absolute commitment settling over her, the same feeling Elena must have experienced when she'd walked away from the safe house and into the unknown. "1 hour, Ghost said, checking his watch. "Whatever your mother's got planned, it all comes down to the next hour." Maya closed Elena's journal and looked at each of her unlikely allies. Federal director, biker crew, all united now by the simple recognition that some truths were worth dying for. "Then let's go finish what Roberto Benedetti started," she said, her voice carrying Elena's steel. "Let's go bring our grandfather home." The diner sat in the desert twilight like a monument to forgotten America, its neon sign casting pink and blue shadows across cracked asphalt where 3 generations of violence were about to converge. Maya pressed her face against the passenger window of Chen's tactical vehicle, watching the building grow larger as they approached the coordinates that had haunted her family for 36 years. "Movement on the roof," Chen reported quietly into her radio. "Sniper positions confirmed on the north and east sides." Ghost's voice crackled through the comm system from his position 50 yards behind them. "They've got the place locked down tight. Your mom picked one hell of a place for a last stand, kid." Maya's hands trembled as she clutched her mother's journal, the weight of what was about to happen settling over her like a lead blanket. Through the diner's windows, she could see a familiar silhouette, Elena Castellanos sitting calmly at a corner booth, hands folded on the table as if she were simply waiting for her daughter to come home from school. "There," Maya whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "She's really there." Director Chen pulled into the parking lot with deliberate precision, positioning their vehicle exactly where the tactical commander had specified. Around them, black SUVs formed a loose perimeter, their occupants moving with military coordination. Maya counted at least 20 armed figures, all focused on the small building where her mother waited. Chen's ice-blue eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Whatever happens in there, remember that your mother chose this. She could have run, could have disappeared forever. She chose to stay and fight." The radio crackled with Ghost's voice. "Elena's got something in her hands. Looks like... Is that a laptop?" Maya squinted through the diner windows and felt her heart skip. Her mother was indeed holding a laptop computer, its screen glowing in the dim interior light. But more than that, Elena was looking directly at their vehicle, and even across the distance, Maya could see the fierce maternal love in her expression, the same look she'd worn when teaching Maya to play chess, when helping with homework, when promising that no matter what happened, they would face it together. "She's broadcasting," Maya realized suddenly. "The equipment at the mining station. She's linked to it remotely. Mom's streaming everything live right now, Chen's tactical team took positions around their vehicle, while Ghost's crew dismounted from their motorcycles, Tank moving stiffly but determined despite his injuries. The tactical commander emerged from the lead SUV, his weapon raised but not quite aimed, playing his role in Elena's carefully orchestrated theater. "Ms. Castellanos," the commander called toward the diner, "you have something that belongs to us." Elena's voice carried clearly through the desert air, amplified by speakers Maya now noticed mounted on the diner's exterior. "I have something that belongs to the world. The truth about what you did to Roberto Benedetti. The truth about the $43 million you've been killing to protect." Maya stepped out of the vehicle before Chen could stop her, her legs unsteady but her voice strong. "Mom!" The reunion was surreal. Elena rising from her booth and walking to the diner's entrance while armed figures tracked her every movement. While cameras somewhere broadcast this moment to an audience Maya could only hope was watching, while the weight of 4 decades of buried secrets hung in the desert air between them. "Mija," Elena said softly, tears streaming down her face. "You found him. You found Ghost. You found the truth." Maya ran toward her mother, but Ghost's hand on her shoulder stopped her just short of the diner steps. "Elena," he called out, his voice thick with emotion Maya had never heard before. "I'm sorry I never looked for you. I'm sorry it took 36 years. Elena's smile was radiant despite her tears. "You raised good men, Dad. Men who were willing to help a stranger's daughter when she needed them most." The word "Dad" hung in the air like a prayer answered, and Maya saw Ghost's scarred face crumple with a lifetime of grief and gratitude. Around them, the tactical teams shifted impatiently, but the moment held. 3 generations of a family finally together, finally acknowledging the bonds that violence had tried to sever. Then Elena's expression hardened, and she looked directly at the tactical commander. "Gentlemen, you've been very patient, but I'm afraid our business here is concluded." She held up the laptop, and Maya could see data streaming across the screen. Files, documents, financial records, names and dates and connections that painted a 40-year conspiracy in damning detail. Everything you've done to protect Roberto Benedetti's discovery, every person you've silenced, every crime you've committed, it's all been broadcast live for the past 20 minutes. The evidence is already in the hands of journalists in 12 countries. The commander raised his weapon, rage replacing calculation on his face. But Elena simply smiled. "You lose," she said quietly. "Finally, after all these years, you lose." The tactical commander's weapon discharged into empty air as 3 things happened simultaneously. Ghost tackled Maya to the ground. Director Chen's backup teams emerged from concealment behind the diner, and Elena Castellanos walked calmly down the steps toward her daughter, with the laptop still streaming evidence to the world. "It's over," Chen announced. Her own weapon trained on the commander who had just revealed himself as the conspiracy's linchpin on live broadcast. "Stand down, all of you. You're surrounded by federal agents, and everything you've done here tonight has been recorded." Maya struggled to her feet, her heart hammering as she watched the tactical teams realize their situation had inverted completely. Elena hadn't just gathered evidence. She'd orchestrated a sting operation that turned their own violence against them, broadcast live to an audience that now included news networks, federal investigators, and international human rights organizations. "Mom," Maya breathed, launching herself into Elena's arms. The embrace felt like coming home after the longest journey of her life, solid and warm and real in a way that made the past days of fear and uncertainty seem like a nightmare finally ending. "Mija, you were so brave," Elena whispered against her daughter's hair. "Braver than I ever imagined. You found the truth I couldn't protect you from." Over her mother's shoulder, Maya watched Ghost approach slowly, his scarred face transformed by wonder and grief. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking on her name. "My little girl, we all thought you were dead." Elena pulled back from Maya but kept one arm around her daughter as she faced the man who'd unknowingly shaped both their lives. "I was dead in every way that mattered. They made sure of that when they murdered Roberto and scattered our family. But Maya..." She looked down at her daughter with fierce pride. "Maya brought me back to life, brought us all back." The tactical commander spat blood, Chen's restraints cutting into his wrists. This won't hold. You have no idea how deep this goes. How many people? 43 people over 36 years, Elena interrupted calmly, consulting her laptop screen. I know exactly how deep it goes because I've spent the past 8 months documenting every connection, every payoff, every murder you committed to hide Roberto's discovery. The world knows now too. Rico helped tank toward the impromptu reunion, both men moving carefully but with obvious relief. So what happens now? Rico asked. To all of us, I mean. Ghost's crew, Maya, you... Elena's smile held depths Maya was only beginning to understand. Now we go home. We become a family. We learn who we really are without fear driving every decision. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. Not the fierce protectiveness that had sustained her through the past days, but something warmer and more enduring. She looked around at the people surrounding them, Ghost with his hidden gentleness, Rico and Tank with their unwavering loyalty, Director Chen with her complicated honor. They weren't strangers anymore. They were family, chosen and fought for and earned through shared danger. Maya, Ghost said quietly, kneeling beside her. I know I got no right to ask, but would you mind if an old biker tried to learn how to be a grandfather? The tears came then, hot and healing. I'd like that, Maya managed. I'd really like that. Elena pulled them both into her embrace, and Maya felt the last pieces of her shattered world settling into new configurations. She was still Maya Castellanos, still fierce and protective and brilliant, but now she was also Maya Benedetti, granddaughter of a murdered idealist and a scarred warrior, daughter of the bravest woman she'd ever known. There's something else, Elena said softly, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Your little brother or sister is going to grow up knowing exactly where they come from. No secrets, no lies, no fear, just family. Maya pressed her hand against her mother's stomach, feeling the flutter of new life that had started this entire journey. What will we tell them about all this? The truth, Elena replied simply. That sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing. That family isn't just blood, it's the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's loving someone more than you fear the consequences. As federal agents processed the captured operatives and Ghost's crew secured their motorcycles, Maya looked back at the diner where so much pain had finally been transformed into justice. Tomorrow there would be trials and testimony, media attention and legal proceedings. But tonight there was just this, a family reunited, a truth finally spoken, a future that belonged to them instead of the ghosts who had haunted them. Ready to go home, Mija? Elena asked. Maya took Ghost's calloused hand in one of hers, her mother's in the other, and felt the desert wind carrying away the last echoes of 36 years of running. Yeah, she said, her voice steady with hard-won peace. Let's go home. The new beginning. 6 months later, Maya Castellanos stood in the doorway of what had once been Ghost's garage and was now something entirely different. Part motorcycle repair shop, part family gathering place, part headquarters for the Roberto Benedetti Foundation. The morning sun slanted through windows that Tank had installed himself, casting warm light across workbenches where Ghost taught her the difference between a carburetor and a fuel injector, while Elena balanced foundation checkbooks and their 3-month-old son, Roberto, slept in a carrier nearby. "Hand me that wrench, kid," Ghost called from beneath a vintage Harley. His voice still carried the gruff authority that had once intimidated her, but now Maya heard the affection underneath. The small one. No, smaller. There you go. Maya passed him the tool and marveled at how normal this had become. Working alongside the grandfather she'd thought was a dangerous stranger, learning skills she'd never imagined needing. Her hands, once soft from honor student privilege, now bore calluses from honest work. Her shoulders had broadened from lifting motorcycle parts and carrying her baby brother. She was still brilliant, still fierce when threatened, but the desperate edge of fear that had driven her across the desert had transformed into something steadier, purpose. Maya, mija, can you check on Roberto? Elena called from the office area they'd carved out of the garage's back corner. "I think he's getting hungry." Maya wiped her hands on a shop rag and walked over to where her little brother lay sleeping, his tiny fist curled against his cheek. Roberto Benedetti Castellanos had been born during the media storm that followed the diner confrontation, entering the world while reporters camped outside the hospital and federal prosecutors built cases against 47 CO conspirators. But he'd grown up in this garage, surrounded by the rumble of engines and the gentle voices of people who'd fought to give him a better world than the one they'd inherited. "He's still asleep," Maya reported, running a finger along the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "But probably not for long." Elena smiled, the expression transforming her face in ways Maya was still getting used to. Her mother had always been beautiful, but the constant vigilance was gone now, replaced by something deeper and more enduring. "Good. That gives me time to finish these grant applications." The foundation's received requests from 12 families so far, all children of whistleblowers who need legal protection. The Roberto Benedetti Foundation had been Elena's idea, funded by the federal settlement that finally acknowledged 36 years of wrongful persecution. Maya served on the board despite still being in high school, her voice carrying weight earned through experience most adults couldn't imagine. She'd learned to read legal documents, to interview traumatized families, to speak at congressional hearings about the cost of buried truth. Rico emerged from beneath the hood of his rebuilt bike, grease streaking his young face. "Ghost, you sure this timing is right? She's running rough." "Patience, son," Ghost replied, sliding out from under the Harley with surprising grace for a man his size. "Engines are like people, they need time to heal properly after trauma." Maya caught the meaningful look he sent her way and felt the familiar warmth that came with being understood without explanation. Ghost had become more than a grandfather. He was a mentor who spoke her language of fierce protectiveness and hard-won wisdom. Tank limped in from the street, moving better than he had 6 months ago but still favoring his left side. "Mail's here," he announced, dropping a stack of letters on Elena's desk. "Looks like more interview requests and a package from that documentary crew." "No more interviews," Maya said firmly, a reflex that still kicked in when strangers wanted pieces of their story. "We've told it enough times." "Actually," Elena said gently, "I was thinking we might consider the documentary. Not for us, but for the other families. The ones still hiding, still afraid. Maybe hearing our story could help them find courage to tell theirs." Maya considered this, weighing her protective instincts against the greater good. A calculation that had become second nature over the past months. "What do you think, Ghost?" Her grandfather straightened, wiping his hands on a rag as he studied the faces of his chosen family. "I think," he said slowly, "that your mother's right. Truth isn't something you hoard. It's something you share, even when it hurts." Baby Roberto stirred in his carrier, making the small sounds that meant he'd be demanding attention soon. Maya lifted him carefully, still marveling at how someone so tiny could represent such an enormous victory. He would grow up knowing his great-grandfather's name, understanding that good people sometimes paid terrible prices for doing what was right, learning that family was both inheritance and choice. "What do you say, little brother?" Maya whispered to Roberto as his dark eyes focused on her face. "Ready to help change the world?" The baby's smile seemed like agreement. Around them, the garage hummed with the quiet industry of people building something lasting from the wreckage of old pain. Outside, Phoenix sprawled in the desert heat, full of challenges and possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new cases for the foundation, new students for Maya to tutor, new engines for Ghost to repair with patient hands. But today, there was this, a family gathered in purpose and love, no longer running from truth but finally completely free.